everybody for coming. Welcome to Asian Heritage Month. Like we have Black History Month every year, there is now a new initiative, a national initiative, and it is now to celebrate Asian heritage. So we have got a very special event today. We are starting off with the history of the immigration of South Asians to the UK, which I can actually relate to that because my dad came here in 1962 and he has told us many stories of what happened when he came, the racism and all the rest. We'll talk a little bit about that later. After that we've got a poem, we've got a poet here, and she is going to do a poem on Asian culture, and she's going to do it in Urdu, but she will translate it in English later as well. Then after that, we have got Graham, who is going to talk to us about the active environment strategy, including some exciting news on free cycling, which I can't wait to tell everybody about. Then we have got lunch. We will be having a buffet lunch. Some of us have brought Asian dishes to share with everybody, but also there is also a lady who's made biryani, and she will be with us in a minute and she will be selling that. So we will have a typical Asian lunch today, and then in the afternoon we will be henna designing and painting, which is a very prominent Asian art. Okay, so let us begin now with the history of Asians in Britain, and we're doing this to celebrate South Asian Heritage Month. And we will also look at some of the contributions to Britishness as well. So, when we say South Asians, it consists of these regions. And all of this region was all India before, all of it, everything. And then later on, India then got partitioned into Pakistan, and then later on into Bangladesh. Originally, it was West and East Pakistan, once the partition happened in 1947. And then Pakistan was East Pakistan and West Pakistan, which then got split to make Pakistan and Bangladesh. And then Afghanistan is actually right neighbouring Pakistan. Okay, so although immigration of Asians is generally thought of as being a recent arrival in England, Asians have been here a long time, okay? Does anyone know what century Asians first came to Britain? Any ideas? Pop your hands up if you know. Which century did Asians first come to Britain? Wanya? 18? No, way before that. Way before that. Way before that. Way before that.
The Tudor time?
The
Queen Tudor time?
Yes, that's more like it, the Middle Ages. Don't forget, we know Muslims came here by 700 AD. Islam had spread. So we know Asians must have come here then. Okay? So, what are the first types of Asians that came to Britain? Any ideas? Graham, I'm going to test your knowledge here.
Was it called Moors?
That's a really good one, but Moors are not Asian. So if you look at that map, they were African. But that is not a bad answer at all. That's an excellent answer. Now you know why I gave him the job. That's an excellent answer, because it was the Moors. You are right about that. But we're looking at Asians. This is the Asians.
Indians?
It wasn't Indians, it was actually the Roman gypsies who were from Indian descent. Okay? So they came here. They first started coming over from the Middle Ages, and then it was in 1000 AD a great big influx came, and they carried on coming until 1700 AD. Okay? DNA surveys have linked Romanis to present-day South Asian populations, and the Romani language is a member of the Indo-Aryan language family. Romanis are believed to have begun travelling westward, especially in 1000 CE, and have mixed with Middle Eastern and European populations over many centuries. Romani began arriving in sizable numbers in parts of Western Europe in the 16th century. Okay? And then, if you look at this chart here, when Islam spread, and if you look at the yellow, Asia, okay, which was in 750 AD, Islam had spread to Asia. Asia is yellow. What else is yellow? What can you see that's yellow up there? Europe. That means that Asia, Asian people must have shifted over into Europe. And that was as early as 750 AD. Okay? They travelled to Spain, the Spanish borders, and then came into England. Why? Why?
Spread Islam? Oh no, to work in the plantations.
No, what plantations?
In
England?
Oh, sorry.
No,
To work in the
you're
factories.
thinking, pardon?
To work in the factories during the industrial
No,
revolution.
look at the year, 750 AD. What did the first Asians first start coming to England for? What for? Grain. Trade. He knows more than all of you, by the way. And this is why we gave him the job and not the other people who came forward for the job who were Asian. We gave him the job because you can see it. He has got more knowledge than all of you. Okay? So it was trade. All the spices and the gold and the silk, yeah, and the perfumes and the musk all came from Asian lands. And the traders, they came to the English ports selling perfume, spices, clothes and gold. We have got evidence this happened because there are coins that were found actually in Brighton which have got Islamic writing on it, the Shahada on there. And that's how we know that Asians came over and traded and gave some coins and things as well. Okay? This is actually King Ofer of Mercia. He minted a coin copied from the dinars of the Abbasid Caliphate. And it bears the Shahada on it, which is the Islamic, the first pillar. Okay? And that's how we know. And these are actually from the British Museum. These are some coins found in the British Museum, and they have Arabic writing on there. Because if you look at the numerals in Asia, especially in Pakistan, they are the same as Arabic numerals. Okay? Right. The other thing that happened was world navigation maps started showing India on there. Now, Muslims actually invented maps. Did you know that? The first geographers were Muslim. And the maps actually showed India and Asia on them. So Muslim geographers produced untold volumes of books on the geography of Africa, Asia, India, China and the Indies during the 8th to the 15th century. These writings included the world's first geographical encyclopedias, almanacs and road maps. Ibn Battullah's 14th century masterpieces provide a detailed view of the geography of the ancient world. Muslim geographers far exceeded the output by Europeans regarding the geography of these regions well into the 18th century. So what happened was, these maps that were made, they were exchanged with the British. And the British then realized, oh, there's India is over here, and Asia exists over here. The more knowledge started coming of Asia, where it is, okay, and that it even exists. And then the next really important connection between Asia and Britain was from Elizabeth I. Okay, now a big threat happened in Elizabeth I's time. Does anybody know what that was? Those who are born here will know there's a big threat with Elizabeth I.
She wasn't the legal heir to the throne.
Yeah, but what was happening? There was a war about to happen in her time.
Was it the Spanish Armada?
That's it, the Spanish Armada. Okay, so the Spanish Armada was actually about to happen, and she needed to strengthen her ties with the rest of the world so that she could be a stronger queen to help fight. Okay? So Elizabeth I of England was one of the earliest British monarchs to establish relations alliances and trade with Muslim majority countries. Now we've got evidence that she maintained ties with Asians, because did you know that she actually had one man who was an ambassador to Queen Elizabeth I. He was called Abdul Uhed bin Masood. He was Moorish. And there's a painting of him from the collection of the University of Birmingham. He was actually an ambassador to the Queen. This is how clever she was. She started investing into interfaith and different cultures to strengthen her army for this big war that was coming, the Spanish Armada. Okay? The Ottoman Empire came out really big here. She strengthened her ties with the Ottoman Empire, and they helped her against with the Spanish Armada, otherwise Britain would have been invaded. Okay? Does anybody know what other huge thing that Elizabeth I did to make a big connection with Asians? Any ideas?
East India Company.
That's it. Brilliant. East India Dock Company, she founded that. It was not Queen Victoria. Okay? So they had the maps to know where Asia was. The traders were coming in to trade the silk and all the gold and all the spices. Right, she said, let's send our ships there and let's start getting the stuff over ourselves. So the first thing she did was she established the Venice Company and the Turkey Company, which formed the Levant Company. This was an English chartered company formed in 1592, formed with the purpose of regulating English trade with Turkey and the Levant, which is like the Middle East. This is a portrait of an English merchant called Francis Levat, and she made him dress like a Turkish man to make it out as a Turkish company so that people will trade with that company. So she was very clever, really. And once that was really, really established and famous and really well established, she thought, right, let's go to Asia now. So this is then the East India Company, which was founded at the end of the 16th century, and it is a royal charter granted by Elizabeth I in 1600, and it gave it exclusive rights to trade to India and the Far East. The company built its own shipyard at Deptford in 1609. Okay? And this is a real-life painting of the scene of, can you see the elephant coming as well, off the boat, fresh off the boat, with all the goods, trading to all the English. Okay? This was actually a landmark in history, it really was, because this is what brought more Asians then to England, because there were cooks on that ship cooking curries and things, and then they brought curries into Britain, okay, and things like that. And some of the Asians, the traders, they stayed in Britain for a couple of days until the time when the ship goes back again. Guess what culture they wore? Afia, the people on the ship. Well, what culture are you?
Oh, Bengali.
Bengali!
I was thinking that one.
Bengalis were the first established Asians in Britain. They brought the curries over. I will talk to you about the very first restaurant that was opened in central London. And more, there were Bengalis. They were very clever, very intelligent people. Very clever, very intelligent people. But they were illiterate, but they had the brain power. You know why? Because of fish. Yeah. Now, more history for you. We're going down the timeline. In 1641, this is a newspaper article which talks about all the different religions that were camping out in London. What can you see on there which gives you an idea there were Muslims or Asian Muslims living in London, even if it was for a couple of days? You can tell me. The Mohammedans over here. There it is. Mohammedans. Can you see? Mohammedans. Okay? And that shows that there were Asians living in London, even if it was for a couple of days, while the trading went on. And there was a lot of racism, okay? Because, what does it say there? A discovery of 29 sects here in London, all of which, except the first, are most devilish and damnable, being there which followed. Okay? So what does that mean? Protestant is Church of England. So what the newspaper is saying is Church of England is the best faith, and everybody else is devilish and damnable. So it was outright racism in those days. And those traders were not allowed to live here. They could only stay until the ship goes back again. Okay? Right. Okay. Now, a large group of Muslims in Britain arrived in 1760. There were sailors recruited in India from Bengal to work for the British East India Company. Ship's cooks came too. Many of them came from Sylhet in Bangladesh. Okay? And they would change their name because of the racism. So there was a man called Sheikh Deen Muhammad, and he changed his name to Sheikh Deen Mahomet, so he could be more included. And he was the captain of the British East India Company in 1810, and guess what? He founded London's first Indian restaurant, and he named it an English name. He called it the Hindustan Coffee House. But really we know it's Hindustani, isn't it? Hindustan Coffee House. That was in the newspaper, the Morning Post, in 1810. Do you want to see a picture of him?
Yes.
Does he look English?
No.
He doesn't look English, but look at the way he's seated. He looks like the painting is like an Englishman. Okay? So, Sheikh Deen Mahomet, Sheikh Deen Muhammad, this is a portrait of him from Royal Pavilion and Museums, Brighton and Hove. Why Brighton? Why on earth is he in Brighton?
Is that where the ships came?
That is where the coasts were, where some of the Asians were coming to trade all their goods, which I spoke about right at the beginning. Okay? I find that absolutely fascinating. Apart from the very first curry house, what else did he make in Britain? Now, I'll give you a clue. In Islam, we wash 5 times a day, right? In the days when he came, the English didn't have a bath once a year in a tub shared with 5, 6 other people. Okay? And they were scared they would catch a flu if they had a bath. Okay? So, what do you think he opened up? Being a Muslim. A bathhouse. When he opened the very first public baths, guess where? In Brighton. That's where all the Asians were coming. Okay? So in 1810, shampoo was introduced to England by a Muslim entrepreneur who opened Muhammad's Indian vapor baths at the beach in Brighton. The references in the books of the travels of Deen Muhammad and shampoo. Page 167. Okay? Can you read on there? It says hot, cold douche shower, original medicated shampoo. And did you know people from all over England were going to those baths?
Just the men, though. Was it just the men? Or
I think there's ladies in there. Can you see ladies in there as well? Yeah. So I think the Victorian aristocratic ladies were going as well.
They probably didn't know how to use a bath.
Well, he must have showed them. There must have been demonstrations of courses, maybe. Okay, very interesting. Now, I mentioned Bengali for a reason, because this is important. The next educated person who came to Britain was Bengali again, okay? And this time he was very well
Is it a
learned.
history lesson?
Yes, this is a history lesson. The first educated South Asian to travel to Europe and live in Britain, actually live in Britain, so times are now changing, because of the Hindustani curry house and the baths, people are accepting Asians a little bit more. So he's the first one who actually came to live here. He was Bengali, Itsam Uddin. He was a Muslim cleric, munshi and diplomat to the Mughal Empire, who arrived in 1765 with his servant Muhammad Mukim during the reign of King George III. Now, we only know about this because a book was published about this. So many Asians may have come, but it's only when books are published that we know. So this happened then, years and years ago. Okay? Right, who was the next landmark queen which established big links with Asians? Queen Victoria. Okay? So what she did was she expanded the East India Company, and she drove the expansion of the British Empire in Asia. So while people were going to India and getting the goods from there, they started getting inside knowledge, the English, and then the Mughal Empire was obviously invaded, and 3/4 of the world was invaded by Queen Victoria, which is why Britain became Great Britain, okay? And links were established really strongly, even though she never ever visited India. But she was called the Empress of India, okay? And she brought over Indian servants. Who has watched the film Victoria and Abdul? I would recommend you watch that film because her secretary to the Queen was actually Indian, okay? And this is him, Munshi Hafiz Muhammad Abdul Karim, and he was her best friend. And he used to cook curries in Buckingham Palace as well for her. And he was in office from 1892 to 1901. He's also there on her Diamond Jubilee. There is videos of him on her Diamond Jubilee. Unfortunately, there was racism still, and after Queen Victoria passed away, obviously she looked after him while she was there, while she was alive. Once she passed away, he was shipped back to India. Unfortunately, they got rid of him because there was a lot of racism. Okay, there were no laws against racism, and obviously Asians were alien, really, in those days. Okay, now the British Empire was great, and lots of Asian countries, including India, was in the British Empire. So now the First World War comes about, okay? And Britain needs soldiers. They haven't got enough soldiers, and they're under threat. So they used lots of soldiers from the countries that they owned. So by 1913, the British Empire held sway over 412 million people, 23% of the world population at the time, and by 1920 it covered 30, whatever that number is, I can't say it, 24% of the Earth's total land area. Approximately 1.3 million Indian soldiers served in World War I, and over 74,000 of them lost their lives as well. So this is actually the Indian Army, and a lot actually came over from Pakistan, from the Punjab area, which is where the headquarters were for the Indian Army. And this is why there is a lot of people who speak Punjabi in, first, second, third generation in the area where you're from, Graham, in Yorkshire. A lot of Punjabis came from the Kashmir region, which is where the headquarters were, in Jhelum, and they camped out in the areas where there were mills, clothing mills, rivers, lakes, and those areas, dock areas, East End where the docks are, and things like that. But not yet, that comes later. These soldiers are not allowed to stay here, they're just used to help fight with the British. So I have got a video now to show you. It's about the First World War and how Asians came here to help.
Britain declared war on Germany on August the 4th, 1914. In the first few weeks of the conflict, German forces quickly advanced through Belgium and France, wiping out large sections of the British army. Defences at the front became so thin that Britain had to quickly call in reinforcements from elsewhere. In September 1914, soldiers began to arrive from India, which is present-day India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. During the course of the war, a total of 1.5 million Indian soldiers came over and fought for Britain. Amongst these 1.5 million brave soldiers, there were over 400,000 Muslim soldiers, and at least 89,000 of these Muslims were recorded as having given their lives for Britain. it is a little known fact that 20% of all British Empire recruits were actually Muslims. According to military historian Gordon Corrigan, if the Indian Army hadn't arrived when it did, the Germans may well have broken through, and they may well have got to the Channel ports, and the whole history of the war may well have been very different. Some of these Muslim soldiers were awarded the highest military decoration, the Victoria Cross, awarded for valour in the face of the enemy.
Okay, very, very interesting there. And then the Second World War, again, same thing happened. Britain did not have enough soldiers, they needed people to come over from the lands which Britain owned to help them. And a lot of the armies again came from the Punjab area. And I'm saying that for a reason because that bit is yet to come. What happens after that, okay? So particularly from the Punjab area where the headquarters were of the Punjab, the whole of the Indian Army, okay? Now, you'll be really surprised, whenever I do this talk, people get shock horror. It wasn't just men. Look at this lady. She's Pakistani. Yeah, this lady, Noor Nisa Inayat Khan, she died in 1944, but she was actually helped with the Holocaust. It's not even well known. I've done a talk actually last year on how Muslims helped with the Holocaust, and this lady came up. And Noor Inayat Khan was a British resistance agent in France in World War II, who served in the Special Operations Executive. As an SOE agent, she became the first female wireless operator to be sent from the UK into occupied France to aid the French resistance during World War II. Inayat Khan was captured after being betrayed and executed at the Dachau concentration camp. Now, she was actually a very big heroine because in Britain there are landmarks to show her even now. So let me show you. Here is a memorial bust of her, Gordon Square Gardens, Bloomsbury, London. And I actually know somebody who's seen that. Here is the George Cross. She was awarded the George Cross, which was the first time ever for an Asian woman. This is a memorial plaque at Dachau Memorial Hall. And here is her name again in this list. Air Forces Memorial at Runnymede, England, memorialising those without a known grave. Okay? Shocked? Yes? Right. Now, England is war-torn. It's bombed everywhere, especially London. Okay? There's buildings collapsed. The country's in poverty. Everything was still being rationed. And the country needs to be built up very quickly with cheap labour. Okay? So England put out an ad into Asian countries and said, you helped us with the war, please come and help us again. We will offer you British passports, come to Britain, please. Okay? And you come here and we will offer you support and you can earn money and you can make a better living. Okay? So, the first Asians came after the black community. The black community first came in the late 50s, the Windrush generation. The next load of ships that came over were the Asians, okay? And they came over in the early 60s, and they came first on boats, okay? And I do know actually my mum's friends, and they've told me stories of coming on the boats. So a boat carrying workers to the docks in London, answering Britain's desperate labour shortage after the war. Asians arrived by ship from South Asia. This marks the symbolic start of mass immigration, not from Europe, but from the Commonwealth. They are encouraged by adverts for work, their sense of patriotism, and some want to rejoin the armed forces having fought for Britain during the war. The British Nationalities Act gives all Commonwealth citizens free entry into Britain, and they are welcomed. However, the lay community in England did not know that the government had called them The government had kept it quiet, and so the lay people in England, there was racism. They saw a brown face, they go, what the hell are they doing here? Go back to your own country. So it wasn't common knowledge that the government had invited them. The government had kept that quiet. Okay? Now, I mentioned the Mirpur region, okay, which is the Punjab region of Pakistan now. And what happened was, a less known reason why many Muslims left Pakistan was the construction of the Mangla Dam in the early 1960s. So there was a massive dam that they were building in the Jhelum area, and that left many families without any homes. So then they thought, they're the ones who were offered, come to England, because a lot of the men had helped with the armies. And at first the men came only, and then they called the wives here. There was actually a documentary, which, Fasila, if you can remind me what it was called, that was on BBC very recently.
The one I told you about.
Yeah.
Was through the decades.
Through the decades, and it was specifically talking about the men coming here first, sharing together, and then the wives came later, and then the kids. And it was like the black community, the Windrush generation, the men came first to earn the living. Then once they got established, then they called the wives, and some poor kids were left back home. I know many kids that were left back home where the grandmothers were looking after them, and then came later. So a lot of their childhood was without their parents, exactly the same for Asians. So it was quite a distraught time. So the Mangla Dam submerged 250 villages in the Mirpur district and displaced 100,000 people. More than half the residents of some villages moved to Britain. Most immigrants came from farming areas such as Azad Kashmir and the northwest frontier, which had close connections with Britain as established recruiting grounds for the British Army and the Merchant Navy. So the most number of Pakistanis you will get are from Azad Kashmir and Jhelum and Mirpur area, rather than Lahore. I'm pointing at you because I know you're from Lahore. Why did the Lahoris come here? Do you know?
Food.
Why did your dad come
Well,
here?
he came here because he wanted a better life. He
And?
wanted a good education.
Education.
Yeah.
That's why my dad came here. So we were Lahoris, we were well off back home. We didn't need to come here. But my dad, he was offered a passport to come here, and he did his master's here. He already had a degree, did his master's. He did his degree as well again because it wasn't recognised. No matter how highly educated you were there, it wasn't recognised in the country. He went to Bradford Uni. He did his degree first, then his master's, and he worked in ICI, which you all know about. ICI, which is in Huddersfield. And that's where he came. So I can tell you a little bit about his story as we go along. So educated people came as well to get more educated for more money, which they could then send back home to help their families. And then they ended up staying here. Originally they said we're going to earn and go back, but then they ended up staying here. Because the kids came along and the kids said, we're not going back, we're British. That's what happened, and it will happen with your kids as well. They're British now, they're not going to think themselves, and what do you want to go back there for? Okay? Right, let's carry on. Now, in the days my dad came, huge racism. Do you know what it said on the doors? Did your dad tell you what it said on the door?
Blacks, no Irish, no...
Dogs.
No.
Brilliant. And that's a well-known fact.
Yeah.
No Irish, no blacks, no dogs, okay? And then later on, that became no coloureds. And my dad could not find a place to live in because every single place said, no coloureds allowed, okay? And in the end, he ended up in one room with about 7 other Asian men, because whichever place offered Asians a place, they'd all go there. And that's what happened in the documentary that you told me about, which I did watch, the
Did
first
your
part.
dad come alone to begin with?
He came alone. He wasn't married then. He was single and
right.
free. My mum was still there. He was engaged to her though. So, look at that. 2 rooms, kitchenette, shared bathroom, £8 weekly, no coloured, no Irish, no children. So the blacks part changed to no coloureds once the Asians started coming. Look at this, face the facts. If you desire a coloured for your neighbour, vote Labour. If you're already burdened with one, vote Tory. The Conservatives, once in office, will bring up to date the Ministry of Repatriation to speed up the return of homegoing and expelled immigrants. That was very, very racist, very difficult to get jobs, and my dad, as far as I can remember, always said to me, get educated. You need to be educated. You need to be 10 times more educated than everybody else to get to the same position. And I have done that all my life. I've always done my best to get to the top. People say, how the hell did you become a lady? How the hell did you become a Queen's Rep? Yes, I became that because I worked really, really hard, and I showed my parents, look at me, I can do whatever everybody else can do. So it was very, very difficult. Asians were not allowed to go on, even be bus drivers. They were not allowed to even be bus drivers. There was a colour bar on the buses, and there was a huge uproar in Bristol where a lot of the Asians and the blacks as well, they got together, there was a big rally. Why can't we go on the buses? They were not even allowed to travel on the bus, let alone be a bus conductor. It was really, really bad. So this is a newspaper article which actually talks about, you know, what happened. And when that uproar happened, and things like this were out for use by white persons only, these public premises and the amenities thereof have been reserved for the exclusive use of white persons. This is actually was very common. All the blacks and the Asians then got together and they did great big marches, and they said, we've got to change the law. Okay? So the very first law then came in, an early history of British race relations legislation was passed in 1965 according to law that specifically prohibited racial segregation, but it did not include legislation about employment or housing until 1968. Students showed support too, and it was backed up by the local MP Tony Benn, as well as Harold Wilson, who became Labour leader a year later. Now, as some of you have seen my life story, my dad is shaking hands with Harold Wilson. So he was a good one, that one. He used to live in Huddersfield. So we've got people here, I can relate to all of you actually. So yeah, so Harold Wilson was one of the good ones. That was going right back to 1962. Right, what was the next big influx of Asians? Does anybody know this? It happened in the 70s.
Idi Amin.
Yeah, Idi Amin was a Hitler. He was like a Hitler. And he expelled all the Asians out of Uganda. And there was a big, big thing in Uganda, Tanzania, and there was one more, Kenya. And there was this thing about Asians are taking over our land, a bit like Hitler, what he did with the Jews, so they were all then expelled out. So here is Idi Amin, who nobody liked, and the immigration then came from Africa. The next wave of immigrants came from Africa, mostly from Kenya and then Uganda. As certain African regimes encouraged a policy of Africanization, life became more difficult for Asians living there, and many started moving to Britain. So it was in 1972, 60,000 Asians were expelled by President Idi Amin from Uganda, many of whom were allowed to settle in Britain. Okay? So, all of those people were all Asians, originally from India mainly. A lot of them were Gujaratis, and they came here and they opened up sweet shops, hotel shops. Okay? That's when all of that era happened. Okay? Right. And I can actually relate to this because later on, obviously I was, you know, around in the late sort of 70s and early 80s, but I can definitely relate to all the hotel shops all of a sudden opening up and things. I can relate to all of that. Right, what does England say at this point now? There's loads of Asians in Britain now. What do you think they may say now?
Go back. Yeah.
No, well, that happens as well, but they said enough's enough, no more Asians, please. Okay? So the government then put a law in place. The Commonwealth Immigrants Act in 1962 and Immigration Act 1971 largely restricted any further primary immigration, although family members of already settled migrants were still allowed. So when you look at Yorkshire, third, fourth generation British, right, going back to the great-grandparents who came during the war. You can talk to them, and I know that was one of the original areas where a lot of Asians settled, and they're third, fourth generation British. So not new ones haven't come, they are there from those times, but they're the offspring, okay? Right, much of the subsequent growth in the South Asian community has come from the births of second and third generation South Asian Britons. Okay, now you mentioned racism. People said go back.
Yeah.
Go back Paki was a very, very traditional saying that happened in the 70s. And skinhead culture. Who remembers the skinhead culture? One of my uncles got beaten up and hit in the stomach, and he had to go to hospital in the 70s, and that was Upton Park Station, Green Street.
There was another one with Alpha Valley Park, a skinhead
Yeah,
beating him up.
yeah. Was that in
Bengal.
Whitechapel?
All
That
right.
was, yes, and I'm coming to that. I've got a video about that. That was a big uproar, and it shook up the police, and everybody got their act together. I'm coming up to that.
Yes.
Yet to come. Okay, this is early 70s. Skinheads, BNP. What was the other one? It wasn't UKIP. National Front. National Front.
And the Utah Circle with an F in the middle.
National Front. Yeah. And I do remember, actually, I mean, I can tell you so many stories. I remember once I was a tiny little dot, and I was coming from somewhere with my dad, and there was this man, and he goes, fetch. And he had a massive dog, and the dog came running towards us. And my dad, I just remember me and my dad running for our lives. And then I remember my dad, do you remember those big black dustbins that were made out of tarmac? Those round dustbins they were in those days, black ones. He got the bin and he put it over the dog, and we ran for our life. And I remember that really, really clearly. And I was just little, I just remember being really scared. So, you know, things like that happened.
That was quick thinking.
Yeah, but it was just there and he just got it. So black and Asian people were the victims of racist violence perpetrated by far-right groups such as the National Front. During this period, it was very common for there to be never any black footballers or Asian footballers, and if anybody went to a football match, that was the end of them. They'd get beaten up and killed. So they couldn't go to any football matches. I supported West Ham United, living in East London, and I used to crave to go to a West Ham football match because it was the final. I don't know if anyone remembers, it was the final once, and it was a really big match, West Ham United. Do you remember that? No? I remember that clearly because they were going on and on about it at school. I was only young, and I came home and I said, Dad, I really want to go and watch West Ham United play the final. Because everyone was going around me. He goes, sit down quietly, you're not going nowhere. Are you mad? And West Ham United pitch was round the corner from us down Green Street. And I never got it. I thought, why not? Why can't we go? You know. And there was a big party in the next road afterwards because West Ham won. And I said, Dad, see, I wanted to go to see the match. See, they won. But we couldn't do it. There were certain things we just could not do. But it's all good things now because my nephew goes, so the times have really changed. Okay, so now I'm going to come up to what you said is crucial. There was a massive killing of a Bengali boy in Aldgate. And there was such a big uproar about that. The Bengalis got together and there was big marches. And the police were quite racist in those days. I've spoken to a police officer, by the way, and he agrees. Because guess what? There were no laws with the police are there in those days. That all happened much later. If you talk to that man, what's his name again? The one who comes on the CDC. I've forgotten his name.
Yeah, James Watson.
Yeah, him. He knows about all that history. It's different now. Now we've got figures to show racism. So I'm going to put on a video. This is the demonstration that happened after there was a racist attack of a Bengali boy in the East End. And the Bengalis are very upset and angry.
July 1978. East End Asians call attention to their situation with a one-day strike.
All the coloured community are on strike. because of racial attacks.
Brothers and sisters, today is the first day when you are going to lead the first black strike in England.
The strike was a community strike. It was not an industrial action. It was organized by the black workers in Hackney and Tower Hamlet in order to protest against the racist attack and the racist killing. We felt that our message has been going through the government and the police.
What you want to do is pick it here, leave 4 o'clock here, take too many of it, all right? The principle, we know what you're doing, so about 5. So you pick your 5 and tell the others to move off, okay?
Nearly 3,000 people started the march.
Okay, so that was the turning point, okay? That was the turning point where the police officers realised we've got to do something, because it was out in the media, it went on the BBC, and Asians were getting stronger, put it this way. They were all uniting together, and some of them had young children who were born here, and they felt, we're British, we're not going to deal with all of this, we're the same as everybody else, like me and you, yes? We're strong ladies, she's a very strong lady, that one there. So we're not going to have this, you know? So that's what then caused all the changing of laws, more inclusion, more diversity, which is what your role is. Absolutely brilliant now, I can't fault it. I go to many events where I am the only brown person there, English Queen events, and I'm treated with so much respect. In fact, my husband couldn't go to the last event, so I took one of my English friends with me, and she was shocked. She said, you're wearing a headscarf, yet they are treating you with so much respect, it's unbelievable. You're getting more respect from the English than you do from your own, you know? Absolutely amazing. So now, that's all in the past. All I can say is everything's absolutely wonderful now. It's getting better, definitely. And Basildon Council is excellent. I've said it before and I'll say it again, so it's on camera. All the other councils, they don't do events like this, but Basildon Council's always at the front, so it's brilliant. Okay, right, why are people coming nowadays now? If there are any more Asians coming, maybe you can tell me, because you're one of the new ones.
For education, for kids' education.
Kids'
Because
education,
we
but
don't
what's the
feel
main
as
reason?
safe in India.
What's that? What's the main reason though? Your husband is a doctor, okay? So the NHS are short of doctors. We are short of teachers, okay? So for things like BT, for things like Ford, NHS systems, nurses. So now, the only Asians which are coming across now are for work purposes. There has been no asylum seekers within Asia. That's more happened within the Arab world, but England's been great in including them. But in terms of Asians, they are only coming for work purposes at the moment. There is no other reason now. And it is equal pay for them, and sometimes they may have to fight for the same position more harder, but I must say in the interview processes it's a lot of inclusion, and it's because of all the good policies now. You know, you'll get a complaint or you can get sued if you disqualify anybody and things like that. So, you know, things are getting really, really great.
But they're equally educated.
They're equally educated, but that doesn't always mean anything. Because my mum came here and did a degree here, but she didn't get a job.
The CEO of Apple is an Indian man.
Yes, there's loads going on
So
now.
they go
Now, the amount of
down
mayors
over
we've seen who are now Asian,
there.
amazing. There was could not even hear of that before. Now I go to mayor events and you always see a brown face or a black face, and you know, Queen's Rep, I was the first one. What a shock to the nations that was. Shock to the nations that was. An Asian being a Queen's Rep? That can't be. So I went to a Commonwealth event and ambassadors had come from other countries around the world, from Pakistan. You know, there were the leaders up there amongst there were ambassadors of the country, and they came here and there was a big event and I was sent there to greet them, and they couldn't believe it. They go, we we were expecting an English person to represent the Queen. How comes you're representing the Queen? You're not English. And I was wearing a hijab, so it was a bigger shock, you know. So I think on the whole, what my point is, on the whole, whatever's happened, it's all changed now and it's all wonderful. I think it is anyway.
लगे हैं फूलों का गहना की आंखें कजरारी लगे सबसे प्यारी पे जाऊं मैं वारी वारी
हो हो बन्नों की सहेली रेशम की डोरी छुप छुप के शर्माए देखे चोरी चोरी बन्नों की सहेली रेशम की डोरी छुप छुप के शर्माए देखे चोरी चोरी ये मान
Okay, right, let's have questions now.
Do we get a lollipop?
Or a star. You get a popper dog. You get a sticker.
No,
Any questions about what I've spoken to you about? Did you know any of that before?
No.
No? Is it all new to you?
Yeah.
Good. I think you can be proud because the first established Asians were the Bengalis.
Yeah.
They were the first established.
Yeah.
The most number of Asians here are from the Mirpur region because of what I said about the headquarters. Okay, right, any more questions? Have you
Which
got
is
any
the
questions?
biggest ethnic group?
The biggest ethnic group is Pakistanis. But if you want to put them all under one banner, Indians. It was all India before, wasn't it? Okay. Oh, that's so sweet of you. Thank you. Well, that's so kind of you. I don't even know you. You just got me flowers.
Oh.
So sweet, that is.
ये लड़की हाय अल्लाह हाय हाय रे अल्लाह ये लड़की हाय अल्लाह हाय हाय रे अल्लाह
बाबुल की गलियां ना छड़ के जाना पागल दीवाना इसको समझाना बाबुल की गलियां ना
Right, let us now have our poet. She's going to come to the front and she's going to recite a poem in Urdu and then in English. Then we'll have a break for maybe teas and coffees. Is that right? So Shafqat is a professional poet. Okay, she is of Indian origin herself, and one of the traditional things within South Asia is poems, poets. In fact, there was a very famous poet called Allama Iqbal. He was really famous at reading poems. So there's a lot of culture of poems. Also, the other reason why is there another reason why poems are very famous within the Asian culture? What's the biggest poems we have got in our religion? The Quran.
The Quran.
The Quran is rhyming. And from the Quran, people get inspired to write poems which are rhyming. Okay?
I'm going to say
Yes.
There's an Islamic background behind poems.
There's an Islamic background
They,
about poems.
they used to call it. Used to
Before
ramble-
the Quran came down, there were loads of poetry going on
But they
in
used to call
Arabia.
it like-
And then the Quran came down and that was all poems.
Yeah.
But the poetic culture has continued in Asia, although it does not surpass the Quran. Okay? So that's a bit of background why we're having a poem. Okay? So our poet is going to recite a poem in Urdu first, and it's about Asian culture. Yes? And then after that, she will translate that for us as well. So nice and loud, please, so it goes in the camera. Okay?
Hello everyone. It's nice to see you all here to celebrate South Asian Heritage Month. And thank you Sidra to invite me here. And Sidra introduced me that I am a poet, but for profession, I used to be a teacher and now I become a foster carer. This poem basically talk about Eid, and you can all relate. Everyone who is coming, who is an immigrant here from another country, we all can relate. We miss our family and our culture most on our festivals. So half of the day just go like that. We are calling our relatives and they are calling us back and we are talking to them. It's like that. So this piece of poetry is about Eid and about the feelings on the day of Eid. So I will recite in Urdu first, and after that I will provide English translation. So it starts with दूर मेरे शहर के पुराने घर की छत पे ले जाता है, ईद का चांद अब मुझे सारी रात जगाता है। दूर मेरे शहर के पुराने घर की छत पे ले जाता है, ईद का चांद अब मुझे सारी रात जगाता है। शाम ढले भिगोती थी चने बादाम और छुहारे, शाम ढले भिगोती थी चने बादाम और छुहारे, अम्मी के हाथ की लजीज सिवैयाँ याद दिलाता है। बहन के हाथों पे मेहंदी का रंग, बहन के हाथों पे मेहंदी का रंग नई खुशबू महकाता है। चूड़ी भरे हाथों का सलाम याद आता है, चूड़ी भरे हाथों का सलाम याद आता है। चांद रात का जागना, चांद रात का जागना और नए कपड़े सिलना, सुबह ईद की नमाज के बाद बाबा के हाथों मिली ईदी याद दिलाता है। सहेलियों के कहकहे नए कपड़ों की दमक, मोहब्बत में डूबी शौक से तकती उन आँखों की चमक। वो बाजार वो झूले नन्हे बच्चे सजीले, वो बाजार वो झूले वो नन्हे बच्चे सजीले, ढेर मेहमानों के मेरे घर पे रेले। हर किसी का अलग ईद की मुबारकबाद का अंदाज, और रेडियो पे बजते ईद के गीतों की आवाज़ मुझे वापस मेरी पुरानी दुनिया में ले जाता है। ईद का चांद अब मुझे सारी रात जगाता है। And now the translation. Crescent moon of Eid, crescent moon of Eid, keep me awake for the whole night. It takes me back to my hometown, to the roof of my home. My mum used to soak chickpeas, almonds and pistachios. One evening before Eid, I miss sevenya cooked by my mum on Eid. My sister's henna-adorned hands smell of fresh henna. Greetings with bangles I still miss. In morning after Eid namaz, my Baba will give Eid. Eidi is Eid money to all children. Stitching of clothes at night to be wear in the morning. Laughter of my friends and glistening of new clothes. Those sparkling eyes, watching deeply, filled with love. Big fairs and swings and merry-go-rounds, and children beautifully dressed, lined. Guests who visit at home to greet and meet from morning till night. Everyone have their unique style to greet Eid Mubarak. Sound of songs of Eid played on the radio far away took me back to my old world. Crescent moon of Eid, keep me awake for the whole night. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, it's lovely.
पिंडिया चमकेगी, चूड़ी खनकेगी, पिंडिया चमकेगी, चूड़ी खनकेगी, तेरी नींद उड़ेगी।
Shafqat has mentioned in her poem, we've actually got here as well. So she mentioned henna as well, which we're going to be doing henna painting later on. We've got the cones, and I think you'll be doing some henna later on, some of the ladies. And you mentioned clothes and things, and we've got some clothes here. And this is actually a traditional drum over there. Let me just bring that over here
We call it dholak.
to the camera. This is actually a drum which people would play on Eid as well.
We usually keep it like that, like we sit on the floor.
Yeah, you can
We keep it like that. I'm not good in it, but I'm just demonstrating. We do it like that.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of all the festivals.
Yes.
And the weddings.
Yes, and I'm just going to tell you another thing. In
Yes.
the Punjabi culture, they would wear it like this. So it becomes a doll, and then
Give me the
it's
sticks.
like this. Let me do it.
Yeah, do it.
You sit at weddings and things.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have got some other bits here, which I might as well show. This is a typical outfit that a girl would wear on Eid. This is actually your daughter's. And if you could come to the front, please, and show us a typical man's outfit with your hat on, please. Okay, you better bag, Joe, so I can show the other bits from here.
I think it's round the wrong way.
That's it. That's it. This bit goes at the front. That is a typical male outfit.
Very nice.
Pakistani. Let's give him a round of applause. And Mwenya, if you can show us your jacket, because I'm going to explain about that as well. That is a typical waistcoat. In Pakistan especially, waistcoats are really in fashion on Eid. And you either get them with sequins on them. Now this one, you will not believe this, but this is mine when I was a little girl. And my grandmother crocheted that and parceled it over for Eid. So I thought I'd bring that today. That's got sequins on it. If you want to just hold that. And men, if you look at Graham's waistcoat's got mirrors on it. And the children's ones would also have mirrors on it. So you can get those in Bangladesh as well.
You still get them nowadays.
Yeah, even nowadays, yeah. So that's typical. This is a typical Indian hat that a boy would wear, and normally traditional for weddings, Asian weddings as well, you would get hats like this. And if it's an Indian person, sometimes you would get them wearing, this is a langa suit. So this is the skirt with the top, okay? And for a woman, you'd wear something like what Shafqat's wearing, a sari. And I've got a sari here, if anybody wants to try it on, that's one of my saris. Okay, and I've got one on actually Gujarati style, so there's even different styles depending on which region you're from. And this is a special Gujarati sari where you put the pallu, which is this bit, over the front. Yeah, and the pleats are here, but it's got split here. It's quite a designer one. So I'm not Gujarati, by the way, but I really liked this sari when I got it because I was going to a wedding, and then I bought this. So yeah, there's so many different styles. Okay, right. End of our fashion show. I think what we're going to do now is have a very quick break with drinks, tea and water, but they've got Lucozade. If we could pop the Lucozade bottles there, and then we're going to have a little quick talk with Graham, and then we'll have our lunch. Is that okay with you? Okay. Right, come along everyone, you can come in. Everybody help yourself, please. Help yourself. We've got
Shall I make you a cup of tea, Sidra?
This is basically, I write it down and then I contact one publisher from back home. And say, oh wow, after a cartoon. Oh wow.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Just like after his dad, yeah?
Yeah. What's in it? You got vegetables? No meat. Are you vegetarian? No, that's meat. Is that fish?
I think it's fish. I'll put it in the bigger dish. You're going to spill out in this one.
Some people would take some home afterwards, so don't worry. I'm coming to you in a minute. Look at you with your English accent.
Yeah, and you want Papa John? No, you go on first. You can stand.
बन्नों की सहेली रेशम की डोरी छुप छुप के शर्माए देखे चोरी चोरी ये माने या न माने मैं तो इससे मर गया हाय अल्लाह हाय हाय ये लड़की हाय अल्लाह
It's such a strong emotional No. Picture.
So you get inspiration from photos?
Memory, photo.
Zoom, Ma. Take this. Okay.
I got this very clever. I've never seen that being done like that.
I'll put that on Instagram.
No, that's fine. I'll give it to you. You and Renee will do it. I used to get together. One second, please.
When I go back,
Mommy, ready?
when I step out from the airport, the first thing
मेहंदी लगा के रखना डोली सजा के रखना मेहंदी लगा के रखना डोली सजा के रखना
It's recording now, okay?
Sidra,
Yeah, they're mine.
you can do the presentation.
Just filming and bring the silent. You stay here, don't go yet. Right, where is your left?
Do you want me to help, Sidra?
No, I'm going to do it because I'm going to film. No, she doesn't need that. She's got in trouble. She's taking the mick, that one. And then that's it. Right, turn around. Hey, give her a hand. And look this way. Come round. That's it. Yay, let's give her a clap. She doesn't need a blouse. That looks nice. It looks good on slim people, tall people, slim people.
Need a bridge. Which I need actually tall or slim. Thank you very much. I should try that. Not fall apart.
That's it, thank you. Have you closed it? You have? No.